Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Effing with the Ineffable. I am Zoe,
And I'm Smokey Pigleton.
aka Will, and happy Feast of St. Joseph today.
Yeah, great Saint Joseph, the
Yeah,
righteous man, the righteous quiet man.
I just finished the novena to St. Joseph today. Well, yesterday, and then I'm part of this. I use this email list called, it's a website called praymorenovenas.com. And it's pretty great. They send you like all the stuff that you have to pray every day to your inbox, so it's easy to not forget, because otherwise I'm apt to forget about novenas and stuff. But they always do, like the 9 days ending the day before the feast day. And then on the feast day, they always say the same prayer at the end, which is basically like, it's a nice prayer. I'll actually read just the beginning of it. Because it is about, so like, you always say the novena usually for like an intention. I said mine this time for a job for my husband, and actually a pretty good job opportunity came up in the midst of this, although we're still praying about it and figuring out what we're
Saint
going to do.
Joseph the worker, huh?
Yeah. So anyway, the first part of this prayer that we always say on the last day of the novena is, Dear Lord Jesus, I have specific requests that may only partially fill the infinite needs and desires that are in my heart. I ask that you answer me not only for those requests, but also for a greater reliance on you to satisfy the needs and desires that you have given me. And I like that because it reminds me that no matter what I'm praying for, like all of this is temporary.
God knows better what you need.
And like even a job, I mean, a job is an important thing. Like we need to have money and we need to be able to like support our family, but it still is only temporary, and I need to keep in mind like the eternal trip that I'm going to take.
It's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, happy Feast of St. Joseph.
Yeah, thank you.
We were
I
chatting.
believe, I think that is that. I think this is a Saint Joseph right here.
Maybe he
with
is
the
a
with
lily.
the blooming staff.
Yeah. I think probably. So
Grandma had this. I don't know if this was one that somebody had buried, and
maybe.
that silly thing where they
Superstition.
bury the statue of Saint Joseph.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's showing reverence.
Yeah, there's a lot of those like weird superstitious things in every religion. I mean, every religion can go, it's like the golden calf, we turn things into like
Right.
into
Right.
other things. It's like the whole like saying a prayer to Saint Anthony to like help find lost things. It's like, I don't know. That's a little.
Saying prayers is one thing. Burying statues is like another altogether.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so
there is the tendency, the idol making tendency of human beings. We need to see something tangible and say, this is what helps us.
Yeah.
So now that I have possession of it, now I have security. It's a security blanket is all it is. It's a teddy bear.
Yeah.
We hold this teddy bear and we say, oh, now I feel loved. It's like, no, you feel a teddy bear is what you feel.
It's like, it's like
you're looking for love and you're seeing it in the teddy bear, but it's not really there. It's all around you. It's just less tangible than the bear.
Yeah. In the Bible in a Year podcast, which we're both listening to, he says a lot that like our hearts are idol making factories, right? Like we are just prone to that, and it's important to remember that so that we can avoid it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the year
finding our security in things rather than in relationship to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's hard having security in our relationship to God because we can't see and touch him, and we are so
And he never tells me what I want to hear. He's never whispering sweet nothings in my ear.
When I pray
Lord,
for a
Lord, you're such a smooth talker.
when I pray for a job for my husband, what I want to happen is just have a bunch of people call up and say, hey, we'll pay you a lot of money to not do a lot of work. Come work for us. But it doesn't always quite work out that way.
No.
That's okay.
When opportunity knocks, it's usually your hand doing the knocking.
Yeah, that's true. So this has to be a shorter show today. So should we get into it?
Yes.
All right. So do you want to introduce what we're talking about here?
Well, I saw an interesting article earlier in the week. I believe it was that Mises.org? There's a couple of, I read the, for some reason I'm getting the New York Times splash news now too, which is kind of interesting. They've got interesting stuff. And I get an everyday email thing from libertarian.org and from Mises.org for different things. And this one I saw, I think it was Mises.org.
It's libertarianism.org. I have
okay.
it up right now.
Yeah. And it was about the partisan brain, which basically refers to the tendency for people who have strongly held beliefs to continue to exercise a bias that reinforces those beliefs.
Yeah.
We choose media that agrees with that because that makes us feel reinforced.
Yeah.
And we choose we sort information. We just filter things out so that information that could dispute or even reject the hypothesis that we are espoused to just gets eliminated. We just we don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like how we were talking, we've talked about this several times before about how when you change your focus, like certain things become background and you kind of just let them go. It's the same thing with everything. Like what you choose to focus on will dictate the information that you're taking in and dictate the information that actually makes it into your brain. Mm-hmm. It's like how they say, what do they say? Like change the things you look at and the things you look at will change or whatever. I don't know.
And in the Bible it talks about we become what we behold.
Yeah.
And that's somewhat what we're talking about here is if you tend to watch a news source and it always has a particular bias and a particular spin, you don't account for that.
Yeah.
You don't say, oh, okay, I know where these guys are coming from. I know what story they're trying to sell. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to take everything with a grain of salt. Then you tend to just take it hook, line, and sinker. You just take all the information at face value rather than being a savvy consumer of it and really saying, oh, these guys have a reason to tell me, anybody who, life is pain, princess. Anybody who tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell us something, right? Mm-hmm. So the example that they used in here, did they use the example of, no, I guess this was an example that was it the one where people who tend to have right-wing interests. Did you see that one? The people who tend to have right-wing interests underestimated the effect of COVID, underestimated the like they were saying, how many people out of 100 people who get COVID, how many people end up having to go to the hospital?
I think this
And
is a different article, but this sounds familiar. But so keep going.
yeah, I saw this other article, and it completely reinforced this sense
Yeah.
that people who tend to identify as liberal, progressive, you know, that the
Democrat, left.
left end of things tended to believe that COVID was much more impactful than it actually was.
Yeah.
People with um, people with right wing uh,
Bias.
biases tended to see it as less impactful.
Yeah.
Um, quiz, trivia question: How many people out of 100? How many people out of 100 actually end up being hospitalized?
So here's the hard thing about this. This isn't, first of all, this isn't deaths. This is hospitalized, but
This
also
is
like,
hospitalization.
and
People
this,
people who have COVID symptoms. How many need to be hospitalized?
so this isn't like asymptomatic people. This isn't like,
I don't know.
this is the problem because like if you take 100 children who test positive for COVID,
Probably.
it's gonna be like 0, like on, it's gonna be less than 1 probably. If you take 85-year-olds, so it's just hard. But like, I'm gonna guess, because I didn't see the number. I'm gonna guess hospitalized. I'm gonna say like 5.
Okay, that's a good guess. The answer is actually 1.
I was gonna say 3, but okay.
But
Yeah.
liberals tended to estimate 20 or more.
Yeah, I knew it was like obviously wasn't that much, but
Conservatives tend to estimate 5 or less.
yeah.
The answer is actually 1.
The answer is actually more optimistic than the optimistic people
Then
assume.
even the most science denying people.
Well, I mean, if you think about
How can the science deniers be overestimating and still be deniers?
Yeah.
I mean, science says what science says. The number is what the number is.
Yeah.
And the problem is people aren't number savvy, people aren't science savvy, people don't understand how to read studies and how to be critical of studies and how to say, well, what did they factor in? What conditions did they,
account for?
Prepare for? Yeah. How did they get these correlations, and how strong is the correlation? People don't care. Just splash a number out there. 500,000 people have died in America and 1,000 are dying every day. Okay, yeah. Out of how many people in the country?
Yeah.
And has it really added greatly to the mortality? It has. There's certainly been a surge in mortality this year. But has that also been made up somewhat by the decline in mortality from flu? Apparently, flu has been just about non-existent this year because of the masking and the distancing and everything.
Because flu is something that can actually be like stopped by masks, whereas COVID, I would say, is from what I've seen, very likely not stopped by cloth masks the way that people use them.
Right.
And like, obviously, I know that
now that's another thing. Everybody's always saying, you gotta mask up, you gotta mask up. Everybody needs to be wearing a mask. It's the thing to do. It protects you, it protects other people. Even if you've had the vaccine, you need to keep masking up. It's like, no, you don't. Number one, I'm not sure that masking has been demonstrably shown to help at all.
With
in
COVID.
reducing either transmission or severity of the illness. Number two, once you're vaccinated, you're not going to be a good vector of transmission.
Yeah.
The the stuff is not going to grow in your body. It's not going to create a syndrome in you. It's also not going to be shed in intense numbers when you're around other people.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to be a good conductor of the disease.
Yeah. The CDC's own info, like before the pandemic hit, said that for a disease spread the way that COVID spreads, like an aerosolized disease, a cloth mask would have to be 16 to 20 layers thick for it to even stop, like have an effect on stopping the disease. I actually read an interesting, it was like a Facebook post or something the other day from a surgeon who was saying, you know, people always say, okay, surgeons wear masks, so masks must work. So like, why do people say that masks don't work? And his thing was saying, like, basically what I was just saying in terms of like aerosolized stuff, it's totally different. Like when surgeons wear masks, they're stopping droplets from coming out of them. But the other point that he was making,
or into them.
Yeah, or into them. But the other point that he was making that I thought was really interesting was he was saying, when surgeons wear masks, they put them on in a sterile way, in a sterile environment. They change them as soon as they start having moisture buildup, and they never ever touch their mask. He's like, go to Walmart or like any store or any public place and watch people with their masks. Like, first of all,
everybody's moving their mask
people
around.
are touching them all the time, which is like just infecting yourself. He's like, you know, people are,
and then you're touching other stuff.
Yeah, and people are re-wearing masks again and again. Like any of those things would totally negate any effect that masks are supposed to have anyway. So I thought that was like an interesting point. About the whole like numbers thing about less than one person going to the hospital. I do, obviously it's interesting to keep in mind that like, we already know that a very small percentage of people are actually dying from the disease. You know, it's like, it's way less than 1% are actually dying from it. So it's kind of like how, that Factfulness book, do you remember that book that, last year, it must have been like Christmas of 2019. We were all together as a family, and you gave us like this state of the world quiz. And it was great because it has a bunch of questions that are like, I actually have the book in the other room, but it has a bunch of questions kind of like here's an example of one would be like, what percentage of girls in the world receive like at least a 8th grade education or something? And then it's like, you know, 1%, 5%, whatever. And every single time that like all of us would guess these numbers, the actual number is always higher than what we guess. Like the state of the world is a lot better than we perceive. And I think a lot of that is because of the media. Because no matter what side of the media you're watching, if you're watching CNN or you're watching Fox News, both of them are making money and keeping people watching by selling you fear, right? Like that's what you have to do.
That's right. They sell, bad news sells.
Yeah.
You know, bad news sells. Who wants to hear good news? Who wants to hear, oh, nothing bad happened in you know, in the city today.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
I could have told you that.
I want to hear some dirty. I want to see some dirty laundry. I want to see some serious crimes committed, some vicious mayhem. Come on, I want to see some grisly murder scenes.
Yeah. So
don't tell me nothing happened.
I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about this partisan stuff, that like, no matter what partisan side you fall into, either side is going to sell you worse news than it is. And I think an important thing to keep in mind,
they've got a narrative. They've got an agenda, and they've got a narrative that kind of fits that agenda, and they try to keep spinning things that direction and trying to sell it to you.
Yeah, I think an important thing to keep in mind, this is something that I've really come to appreciate since the beginning of the pandemic, is Like somebody just asked this on Instagram the other day. They were like, think about like the lived experience of your life in the past year. Like if you didn't ever read the news, if you'd never heard of the word coronavirus, like how seriously would you think that like the state of our world is falling apart, or we're all like, you know, in the grips of this global pandemic, all this stuff? Like, I'm not going to totally discount it. There are people in our lives who have died of COVID, and that's a serious thing. Like, I'm not saying that COVID is made up or something, but I am saying like,
there's people in our lives who've died of meningitis
yeah,
and of flu and of pneumonia. Back in the old days, people died of tuberculosis at a young age. We
yeah,
used to have a lot of people dying of HIV and AIDS.
yeah,
There's things kill people.
yeah.
People, all men are mortal.
You're going to die one way or another.
Right.
And like, once again, I'm not discounting, like, I actually do think it's really, I think that our reaction to COVID is making things a lot worse right now in terms of like my friend whose grandma died a couple weeks ago. No one was able to be in the hospital room with her as she was dying.
What's the point of that?
That's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Like it really is. And
who said no one that was a hospital policy?
Yeah, like if her family wanted to go in and be with her, they weren't allowed to go in and be.
They should have been able to at least sign some kind of waiver that says, if I go in here and if I get COVID, I'm not holding the hospital indemnable for it.
Exactly.
I'm taking my chances because I love my grandma and I want to be with her while she's passing.
And it's more, and me as my friend as a person in her 20s who, like her chance, if she gets COVID, the chances of her being okay are very high. And like maybe the chance to see her grandma and hold her hand and just be with her grandma and give her comfort as she was dying is more important than like your hospital policy. So anyway, it just that part, like, I am not discounting that. I think that's serious, but I do think it's important to keep
things are worth risking death for even. I mean, especially everything has a certain risk of death. When I turned on this computer this morning, I was risking the possibility that it's going to short out and, blow up and shrapnel me with Gorilla Glass or whatever.
I've been making kimchi at home the last week, and I had the lid screwed on tight so that like the gases were building up, and my husband was like, what if he's like, I can't rest easily knowing that this kimchi could go off like a bomb in our house anytime. It's like I could die from a kimchi explosion any minute. So like, yeah.
Remember the Schrader brow in Breaking Bad?
Yeah. The whole point I was making though is just that like my lived experience is like my kids and my husband were still pretty much going about our daily business. Life is pretty much normal. We all get sick. Sometimes we all have diseases that we need to deal with. And yeah, I'm a young, healthy person. So like my fear of coronavirus is much less than for some people. But I just think that it is important. Like I basically stopped reading the news the past year. And I think that it makes me a lot happier of a person because I'm not taking in all the fear and all of the panic and all of the stuff that they're trying to sell me. Like, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to just live my experience and live my life and raise my family and,
Just get the information that you need in order to effectively manage your situation.
Yeah.
The only value of information is to inform action. And if we can't take any action about what's going on in Somalia or Iraq or whether the Chinese are building a road from Africa to China, okay, so what? Who cares? What am I going to have for lunch? That doesn't have anything to do with what I'm going to have for lunch.
Yeah.
What has to do with what I have for lunch is information about what's in my fridge.
Yeah.
And is it Friday? Yes, it's Friday, but it's St. Joseph's Day. So I'm not obligated to abstain from meat.
So bring
Thank
on
you,
the
Saint
bacon,
Joseph.
Saint Joseph. Um,
So anyway, as far as this whole partisan thing,
yeah,
we talked about kind of how that works, the bias. But this guy's got some interesting ideas in terms of he actually they looked at brain activity. They looked at actual MRIs to see how people perceived things differently and processed things differently, and they definitely found some differences.
yeah.
And so he says things like people go along with the group even if the ideas oppose their own ideologies, and belonging may have more value than facts.
I was just going to bring that up and say, do you think that like part of this whole partisan brain and kind of confirmation bias, only seeking out information that confirms, do you think that's part of like an evolutionary thing of like group identity? Because like group identity is a really, I think we kind of discount it in our modern age.
Peer pressure.
Yeah.
Which isn't always external peer pressure. We have an internal pressure to fit in, to not stick out, to belong, to feel like we're part of the crew.
I actually have a great story about this. And then I want to talk
about some
about.
Of us do. Some of us are like
don't care, social outcasts.
Oh, I got stuff on my shirt. You don't like it? Don't look at it.
I want to remind me. I want to talk about the evolution of religion and how I think this goes along with that. But absolutely. Just yesterday, my daughter, who is about to turn 5, she'll be 5 next month.
Oh, that one.
Which is crazy. I love her to death. She's the best little kid ever. She's just great. But so
one of the better babies I've ever met, I have to say. I may be partisan about that, though.
Yeah. So earlier this week, we have this little music class that we go to that my girls have been really enjoying. I'm like the only person who does not like this music class. I think it's lame, but I have so many friends who go and they love it. And I'm like, it must be me because I think it's really lame, but whatever. My kids really like it. So
because you like Radiohead, you're not into Marietta Little Lamb.
That's exactly it. It's because I'm not kidding. It's so like little kid music, and it drives me crazy because I'm like, this is just Charlotte Mason, who is this educational philosopher. She calls stuff twaddle, like if it's just like not worth
dumbed down.
Yeah, like that's what I feel like this. Like we could be listening to like classical music and doing the same thing. But anyway, that's all against the point. The point is, after this music class, a lot of the kids like run around and play afterwards. And one little girl was like being very exclusionary to my daughter and being like, you can't play with us. And I have a parenting philosophy of like, I will never say that we have to include everyone, because I just think that's like, once again, it's like forced kindness is not kindness. And I tell my daughter, like, wouldn't you rather like play with somebody who wants to play with you rather than like be forced to get along with somebody?
Try to infiltrate the mean girls. You want to be one of the Heathers? Really? Why do you want to be one of the Heathers?
Plus, like, this is kind of a weird, controversial parenting topic, but like when people are exclusionary to one person, sometimes it's because like they're just being mean. But sometimes it's because that person is doing something that needs to be corrected. And like, if they want to be fit in with the group, they need to do something. And that's an important lesson to learn. So anyway, there was another girl there who was like, I don't think we should exclude people. Let's all play together. So then like that girl and my daughter went off and played, and the other girl was left alone, which is like, hey, sometimes the social, like,
sometimes it bites you in the butt.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
that got hung on her own petard.
Yeah. So anyway, that happened earlier in the week. And then yesterday we went to, we were playing outside with some friends, and there was a group of like 5 kids who were like running around and excluding another girl, and my daughter was in the group of the 5 kids. And I talked to her later, and I was like, why were you excluding this other girl? Like, that's not very nice. And she was like, yeah, well, one of my friends said that we should play the game that way, and I didn't want to be left out of the group, so I just went along with it. And exactly. I was like, I was like, yeah, I was telling her, like, remember,
you sold your soul. What good is it in the whole world but sell your soul?
And I said, like, remember earlier in the week when that other girl said that you could play together? Like, that made you feel good. And remember when the other girl said you couldn't play? That made you feel bad. Don't you want to, like, and she even, like, basically indicated that she knew it was wrong, but she wanted to be a part of the group, so that she just went along with it.
She felt uneasy. It felt like it was a violation of her morals.
Yeah.
But she wanted to fit in.
And the girl who was kind of instigating the exclusion yesterday is a little bit older, and she sometimes defaults to, like, the group leader, basically, because she's a little bit older. But then I was happy that, like, after we kind of all talked about it together, my daughter was like, okay, let's play house, and, like, you can be the mom, like, trying to include the other girl and stuff. But it's like, this is basic human nature of, like, let's just go along with the group. And even if I'm doing something that kind of makes me feel like it's wrong, I'm just going to go along with it because I don't want to be excluded from the group.
Right.
Because maybe being excluded from the group actually feels worse than it feels to, like, violate my own principles. And that's a scary thing. Right now.
But I think that's again human nature, is that people tend to they do value their status, and they are very aware of their status as either an in-group person or an out-group person.
Yeah.
And they react to that. Some people like being an out-group person. A lot of people, when they go through their teen years, they want to be individualistic and rebellious and all that stuff. And you can always tell the rebellious group by how they dress, because they all tend to dress in the same way too.
Yeah, exactly.
They have a uniform, they don't wear the hair scrunchie, they wear the gothic outfit, or the ripped up stuff, or they get a tattoo that says FTW or whatever, and everybody has their own group affiliation that they really want to go for. And we look at things in a way that helps us to feel that, yeah, that's the good group. We're the righteous people, or we're the cool people. We're the cool kids, and it's unfortunate that, that begins in preschool and carries on throughout life. And I think a lot of people never rise above that.
Yeah, I'm reading this book right now, The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom. Have you heard of this book? I mean, I think Mom's reading it.
Mom's reading it, yeah. She's read me a couple sections. It's a really amazing family. Corey's interesting, and her dad is awesome.
Her dad is great. This is like a picture in the book of, like, their family.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because this is a book about the Holocaust. And I mean, why do things like the Holocaust happen? It's because we refuse, like, it's easier
submission to authority. It's easier to go along and get along than it is to resist and to even object.
She says a lot in this book. Like, right now I'm at the part where it's kind of the very beginning of, it's like 1939 or whatever. Like, it's kind of the beginning of the war. And she said, she said it started very subtly, where it was like, sometimes there would be a nasty word written on in the synagogue, or there would be, like, a brick through the window of a Jewish shop. But it wasn't like, it didn't start off like full on dragging Jews out of their homes and putting them on trains.
At least not really, in Holland or wherever she lives. Yeah.
Yeah. but it was very, you know, it started off subtle, and then it was like, then the disappearances started happening where it was like all of a sudden a shop that used to be open is suddenly not open anymore. Then people actually were getting dragged out into the street, but it's like people didn't speak up and say this is wrong when it was really subtle little things. So it gets progressively harder to step out and say that this is wrong as things progress. And like I totally think that's like, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about like why the Holocaust happened and how ideology is the thing that kind of makes us like forget to actually use critical thinking and reasoning, and once again like look at the sources of information that we have and try to decide like, is this something that's credible or not.
That's why an examination of conscience every day is important.
Yeah.
Because we tend to not want to notice things that make us uncomfortable, but we need to notice things that should be making us uncomfortable every day. It's the, you know, the great metaphor about that is the whole boiled frog analogy. You know, that if you've got a pot of boiling water, you try to throw a frog in, he objects. He's like, no, I'd rather not boil, thanks. But if you put a frog into a pot of cool water on a low burner, that frog will sit there and acclimate by degrees and eventually be boiled without jumping out, because nothing ever triggers his alarm. You know, he accommodates to these subtle changes every day without ever asking, okay, what's you know, where's this leading to? Which is why it's important to be very critical consumers of our own thoughts, of our own biases, especially, you know, it has to start with us. We have to recognize, okay, where are my biases coming from? Am I just listening to whatever Pope Francis says because I'm Catholic and I just assume every Catholic Pope, every Catholic priest, they can't lie, they're infallible? You know, I'm not sure that's a healthy. I think there's some skepticism that probably needs to be exercised there. Am I listening to everything that Joe Biden says because he's the new messiah of the left? I think probably there's some biases there that we need to take a look at. Am I holding on to Donald Trump and saying, yeah, he must have won because he says so, and because, you know, I want to believe that, and so let's storm the Capitol. Let's put on our horn hat and storm the Capitol. Wait, you know, take a step. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
I think it actually goes even more fundamentally than that, which is, this is something that, so my dad constantly recommends the book, The Happiness Trap, which is about the acceptance and commitment therapy, therapy.
ACT therapy.
Which is, I think that book is an incredible book that people should read, because it makes you realize that it's not even just like analyzing the information coming to me and how I'm processing it. It's analyzing the information that I'm telling myself about myself all the time and saying, thinking
about thinking and stepping away from our thought process and recognizing, you know, my brain is biased. My brain is biased. The experiences that I've already had have led me to make certain conclusions that are not necessarily helpful going forward in my life. And I need to be able to take a step back and say, is this way that I'm seeing things right now, is this helpful? Or is this my brain just being lazy and habitual and saying, well, in the past, these patterns have held, and so this is what you should probably do? now that I'm an adult, I need to set aside childish things.
Yeah.
Childish ways of thinking, I need to set aside. If something got set up in my childhood where I'm triggered every time I see a bologna sandwich, that doesn't mean I need to freak out anymore. Now I can say, oh, that one time that person gave me that bologna sandwich and I had diarrhea for 3 days. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that every bologna sandwich is some sort of ticking gastronomical time bomb. I don't have to run the other direction every time somebody breaks out the Oscar Mayer. I can deal with it a little more rationally.
Yeah. And like, it is hard to deal with some of that stuff. Like I'm not.
The awareness is hard. The awareness is hard because it's easy to make assumptions. We want to make the easy assumptions. We want to make the snap judgments, and we want to assume the way I'm thinking about this is the way it is.
Yeah.
This story that I'm telling myself right now, this is the story. This isn't just a story. This is the story, and how I'm seeing it and how I'm feeling about it is the way that I need to see it and feel about it. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
You need to, sometimes you need to take a step back. Did I ever tell you one of the things that I like to tell the people in my group is about, making assumptions and making judgments and not accepting the way things are. There's the good luck, bad luck story. Have I ever told you that?
No.
Oh, it's a great story.
All right, I'm ready.
It's pretty brief, but I think it's kind of illustrative. So let's say there's this guy in China, this old man, my age. He's got a son, like maybe my son's age, and he and his son are running the family farm. And one day, and they live in a village, just old school kind of thing. One day he gets up and his horse got out of the corral and ran off. All of his neighbors come by and says, "Oh, what terrible luck for you. What a disaster. I'm so sorry." And the guy, who is wise, says, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows? Who knows? I don't know." So a couple days later, he wakes up and his horse has come back and has let a couple wild horses back into the corral too. So he quickly closes the corral. Now he's got 3 horses, right? His neighbors come by and say, "Oh man, you must be living under a lucky star. What great fortune for you. Now you got 3 horses. Isn't life wonderful?" And he's like, "Well, good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Couple days later, his son is trying to tame one of those wild horses, gets thrown off and shatters his leg. Just horrible injury, so he's out of commission. He's useless. All of his neighbors come over and just say, "Oh, we feel so terrible for you. It's awful and terrible and it's miserable, and what bad luck." And he's like, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" Couple days later, the emperor sends his conscriptors around to call people into service to go and fight the Huns. Uh-oh. So all the able-bodied young men are being gathered up and taken along to go defend the country. Well, his son can't go. So is that good luck? Is that bad luck? Who knows?
Yeah.
That's the attitude that we have to take all the time, rather than assuming, oh, things are terrible and awful, or things are great and wonderful. We have to say, is it good luck? Is it bad luck? I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the song Marquee Moon?
No.
It's an old song by a group called Television. I just love the song. It's got a great guitar part, but it's also got this kind of like almost Buddhist theme to the music, to the lyrics. And at one point he says, I went down to the docks and I asked the guy how he didn't go mad. And he said, "Look here, Junior, don't be so happy. And for heaven's sake, don't be so sad." And
Yeah.
that reminds me of that. Don't overreact anyway. Wait and see, you
Yeah.
know, like Ram Dass talked about, just loving kindness, acceptance,
Loving
try to
awareness.
love, try to appreciate whatever comes in. Don't assume it's awesome, don't assume it's terrible. Wait and see.
Yeah.
Don't rush to judgment.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that um, radical acceptance of
Yeah.
reality as it is,
Mm-hmm.
rather than uh, trying to see it one way or another.
Yeah.
Because the truth, Ram Dass had this statement: the truth appears to eyes undimmed by desire.
Yeah.
If you're not looking to see things one way or another, either in a fearful way or in a positive way, you're much more likely to be able to see the truth of things.
Yeah.
If I don't want to fit in, and I don't want to, and I'm not looking to curry favor, I'm not going to be saying, "Hey, Emperor, you got some awesome clothes." I'm going to say, "Dude, he shafted you. You're naked. He sold you a bill of goods, is what he sold you. He sold you some lies."
Yeah.
And we have to be willing to see the truth, and willing to accept the truth as it is. Otherwise, these biases are gonna always drive us in the direction of our prejudices.
Yeah.
Either our fears or desires. Either way, it's gonna be a problem.
And I think that, like, a way that the Christian religion has kind of evolved that idea of radical acceptance. This is something that I've really struggled with my whole life, but I've kind of adopted it in the last few months because it's just been a tough time for my family the last few months, is just saying, like, whatever happens is God's will. Which, like, once again, it's a thing of, like, if my child gets cancer and dies, it's hard to be like, God willed that to happen. But at the same time, I feel like we can't function in the world if we're always saying, like, why did this happen to me? Why did it have to happen this way? Why couldn't something else have happened?
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like, it's truly like an evolutionary beneficial thing to be like, no matter what happens, it's God's will, and that's the way it had to be, and, like, it couldn't have been any other way. You know what I mean?
The Job story.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to Job yet in the Bible, but I'd like to hear what they say about that. But the Job story is basically just that. Good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Yeah.
It's God's will. Naked I came into the world, and naked I'll leave. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
My job isn't to understand why things are happening the way they are. It'd be nice if I could, but I can't expect to, because I'm a spiritual and intellectual infant. I can't expect to know everything, or even a tenth of anything. So I just have to kind of go with it and try to honor the wisdom that's around me, try to respond to things the best I can, take advantage of my ability to hopefully perceive things relatively accurately if I'm not looking for a bias.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that movie Memento.
Yeah.
Remember that movie Memento, where he couldn't remember things day by day?
Yeah.
And so he tattooed himself to try to give himself clues.
Yeah.
And at one point he purposely tattooed a lie onto himself so that he would end up killing Joey Pants.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, spoiler alert.
Yeah. It's been a while since
Because he wanted that bias. That was a great movie.
Yeah.
That was
it's been since high school since I've seen it, but that is a good movie. It's very
it's structurally innovative.
Yeah, for sure.
The way it's told in stuttered back and forth. It kind of starts at the end, moves a little bit toward the beginning, and then kind of jumps back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. What else were we gonna say about biases? I got distracted because where are you in the Bible in a year? Because one of the first books we read was the book of Job.
Really?
Yeah. So it distracted me when you said we haven't gotten to Job yet. It's when we read Genesis, we read Job along with it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I guess I was just thinking, oh, we're not that far into the actual book of the Bible yet. But yeah, we did talk about Job.
Yeah, because Job is like, I think Job is actually the oldest book in the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
and the basic story of Job is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, trying to understand God's ways, i.e., trying to understand the full nature of reality and the full meaning of life is a fool's errand. You're never going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And God says, my ways are so much higher than you that you can't even possibly understand. All we can do, all we're called to do is, love the hero Israel. I am the Lord your God. Love me with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Love your neighbor as yourself. We're called to do a few simple things.
Yeah.
Everything else is just we're trying to take control of the story. Yeah. We're trying to control the narrative and make an icon out of that narrative, and somehow overcome fear by doing that, by saying, we know what needs to happen. We know the best way for life to exist. And it's this way. As Jordan Peterson says, there is millennia of distilled human wisdom contained in those holy books.
Yeah.
Those oldest stories have a lot to continue to tell us about what are some successful ways of adapting to reality.
Yeah. I have a priest here who I love I love my church. I'm really going to miss my church when we end up moving away from here. But
don't assume.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
you hope. You have a desire to move away from it.
I mean, like, I'd be happy. Once again, I'm taking the position that it's like, I can pretty much figure out a way to be happy anywhere. I'll just figure it out. So if we're here for the rest of our lives, we'll figure it out. It'll be fine.
It's not so bad.
I do really like my church. Like, I wouldn't be sad about that. But anyway, the whole point is, I have this priest who I really like going to confession to him because he's really intense. He makes me cry, like, every time I go to confession to him. And
Good.
And
he's a good therapist. If you ain't crying, he ain't trying.
And this last time I went, I was confessing that, like, I pray a lot that, like, for certain things, but I'm not, like, fully open to God's plan for me about this. It's like, I've been praying that my husband will get a good job, but I'm not, like, fully willing to go wherever God wants to send me for that job. Like, I have a couple ideas of what kind
Uganda? Oh, hell no.
Yeah, it's like in the Book of Mormon. Did you ever see the Book of Mormon? he wanted to go to Orlando.
Go to Orlando.
But he ends up going to Uganda.
Be a missionary to Orlando.
Yeah, and he thinks he knows better than God. And he's like, I should have gone to Orlando. It's kind of the same thing. And the priest was like, so you're asking God to do your will. You're not asking to do God's will. Which is true. And it's kind of like that saying of, at the end of your life, when we get to heaven, God will either say to us,
come
we will either say to God, your will be done, or God will say to us, your will be done. Because we're either assenting to God's will, or God's going to say, you know what, you had a lot of chances, but I can't force you. I can't force you to do what you don't want to do, because you do have free will. So your will be done. But unfortunately, that means separation from me. So I think that's I don't even remember why we started talking.
And the separation from me means God's exclusionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
he's real clear about what it takes to be part of his group.
Yeah.
It is and he's pretty forgiving. He allows us to be part of the group, even though we often break the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, we often talk about Fight Club. Oh, there, I did it again.
Just yesterday in the Bible in a Year podcast, the reading was about I'm at the very end of Deuteronomy, basically, where Moses is talking to the people, and Moses says,
he's dying. He's saying, oh man, I'm worried about you guys. You guys are gonna screw up so bad.
God says to the people, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to help you get to the promised land. I'm going to give you all this land, even though I know you're going to prostitute your hearts to other gods. Like, I know you're going to turn away from me, and I'm still going to fight for you because I love you. And like, I want to get,
because that's how I am, and I don't do things based on how you are.
Yeah.
I base things on how I am.
Yeah.
And I wish you would do things based on how I am and how I want you to be, rather than pushing that easy button all the time, you creeps.
So yeah, I want to. I don't know. I had an idea about talking about the evolution of religion, and just how that whole idea of like the high cost of entry, how like we think that like a lot of these religious rituals and stuff are really hard, and we think like these rules are so arbitrary and weird. Like, why, especially when you read the Old Testament, it's all these sacrifices of like doing your best, and like, you know, sacrificing animals in a certain way, and going to the temple a couple times a year. All this
Cut
stuff,
off the
like,
tip of your penis. What?
Yeah, it's like these are really hard things, but it's like if you look at the evolution of that, you know, a lot of people have hypothesized that these evolved because of the high barrier to entry theory, where it's like, if you do those things and I've done those things, now I know that you're at least bought in enough that I can like trust you and consider you part of the group. And so it's like a lot of these things seem crazy, but we would do crazy things to be a part of the group, because that's how important group identity is to us. And it gets back to what we were talking about the partisan brain. Yeah, I just think that's really interesting. I have to go in a few minutes, so I don't know. Is there anything else we wanted to talk about?
Yeah, let me just quote this one part.
Sure.
This ought to be deeply concerning to everyone who belongs to a political team or a religious team. Yeah. Processes that are taking place in your brain underneath or beyond the level of direct awareness that are informing your conclusions about important social and political issues. To reflect on this for even a moment should fill anyone who aspires to critical thinking or rationality with a kind of dread, for loyalty to the team seems to be overriding the higher faculties of the mind.
That is a good quote.
Yeah. It's like you are sacrificing your ability to make good decisions in order to fit in with the crowd. So you have to, that does mean that you have to be very choosy about what crowd you want to fit in with.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, choose your friends wisely, because, you know, birds of a feather flock together, but whoever you flock with, you tend to start growing feathers like they do.
Yeah. Sure. I actually,
it goes both ways.
Yeah. I actually think that who your friends are as a teenager has a huge effect on who you become as an adult. Like, I've thought that for a while, and that scares me, like, you know, as a parent, because I can't control who my kids are friends with. Now, as a homeschooling parent, I have more ways of shifting the waters of where my kids end up and who they hang out with, rather than if I just send them to public school and say, figure it out. But you know, that is
that's why as a parent, the efforts to build up the self-esteem and the self-confidence and the willingness to go against the stream is really important, because kids are going to have this pressure. Sometimes it's overt pressure to fit in with the lowest of the low. And they have to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, they have to be able to stand up to bullies and not kind of become part of the mob.
Yeah.
You know, become part of the squad.
And that's why I think it's really important, like, the first lesson in the Baltimore Catechism is, like, who made you? God.
We belong to God. We belong to God. We don't belong to...
Like, my identity does not come from being a libertarian. My identity doesn't even really come from being a Catholic necessarily. It comes from being a daughter of God. Like, being Catholic is part of that, but, like, it's only part of that insofar as I don't let it become a division against other people, like Protestants or people of other religions or whatever. Like, my identity is that I am a daughter of God, made in his image and likeness. And that is where I get my worth and my identity. I don't get it from being a traditional Catholic or a liberal Catholic or a Novus Ordo Catholic or a traditional Latin Mass Catholic. Like, there's a lot of divisions.
Or a white supremacist or a BLM or a Gang of Four or whatever the, you know, whatever the political winds are blowing now, and whatever flags are flying. Those flags don't matter. Those flags come and go.
Or a Packer fan or a Maryland resident. Like, there's infinite ways to classify people, you know? Like, my identity doesn't even come from being a woman versus a man. Like, yeah, that is an important part of my identity, but it's not the whole thing. Like, being a child of God is more important than that. So know your worth and know your dignity.
Let me end with one quote from Father Dan. Father Dan always used to say, don't worry what other people say. You have to realize God made everybody from nothing. So what are you going to take? The opinion of God or the opinion of a former nothing? Former and probably future nothing.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And I think that, if we remember that ourselves and we pass that on to our kids, I think that they are going to be on a better path to avoid those going with the crowd.
That's the so-called armor of faith that protects you against the whims of, you know, the evils of the present day, which are always, there's plenty of evils in every present day.
Yeah.
The world's never been without enough evil.
We just this week had the feast of St. Patrick. And man, talk about somebody who had to endure a lot of evils in his life. I mean, he literally was a slave. He was born and got taken by raiders and made to come over to Ireland and be a slave.
Pirates, yeah.
But I was gonna say he one of his most famous prayers is called the breastplate of St. Patrick, which is like, Christ before me, Christ within me, Christ, you know, like Christ all around me. That's the same thing. It's having that armor of faith. Yeah. Like that's what that prayer is. So,
and having that security made him capable of going back to his former oppressors and loving them enough to try to evangelize them.
Yeah.
That's astounding.
Yeah.
That's pretty saintly.
Yeah.
Good job.
He followed.
Well done. Patty.
But he followed the will of God enough to say, like, I will go back there if you're calling me to go, which is what I'm failing to do right now and saying, I will go wherever you tell me to go. Like, yeah, that's
Siberia. Oh no.
So
okay,
anyway,
we gotta quit. You gotta get to mass.
I know I'm going to mass to celebrate Saint Joseph. So
pray for me.
All right, will do. I thank you
And
for watching this.
I'll pray for you.
Yeah, I'll pray for all our viewers too.
Yeah. God bless you all.
Thank you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Try to always consider the source and take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, even us.
Right, I might be trying to sell you something too.
We're not monetized yet, but you never know. Anyway.
But I'm looking for it.
Okay, bye everybody. Have a good week.